The ion storm tore through Nolan Wade's shuttle like a hungry beast, ripping apart navigation systems and sending the craft into an uncontrolled spiral toward the surface of Terralux 9. Warning sirens screamed as the auxiliary power flickered and died. Mayday, Mayday, this is Terran Diplomatic Corps Shuttle TD-117 requesting emergency assistance, Nolan shouted into the comms, knowing it was futile. The storm had severed all long-range communications minutes ago. The planet's surface rushed up to meet him, a swirling canvas of turquoise forests and silver lakes. Come on, he muttered, wrestling with the manual controls. With a final desperate maneuver, he managed to level the shuttle enough to avoid a nose-first impact. The craft slammed into the dense forest canopy, metal shrieking as branches tore at the hull. The final impact knocked Nolan forward, his head striking the console before darkness claimed him. Pain greeted him first, a throbbing ache behind his eyes. Then came awareness of cool air against his skin and the sweet, unfamiliar scent of alien flora. Nolan blinked, his vision gradually adjusting to the dim purple light filtering through the shattered viewport. The shuttle had come to rest at an angle, half buried in rich violet soil. Emergency systems were dead, leaving only the ambient glow of the forest to illuminate the wreckage. Nolan unstrapped himself with trembling fingers, wincing as pain lanced through his ribs. A quick self-assessment revealed bruised ribs, a gash on his forehead, but nothing immediately life-threatening. His emergency pack had survived, containing basic medical supplies and a week's worth of rations. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. The shuttle door was jammed. After several attempts to force it open, Nolan climbed through the fractured viewport, careful to avoid the jagged edges. Outside, the alien forest loomed in twilight beauty. Massive trees with luminescent bark stretched toward a sky painted in shades of amber and magenta. Two moons hung low on the horizon, one silver, one pale green. Beautiful way to die, Nolan murmured to himself, checking his handheld scanner. The atmospheric composition was breathable, though richer in oxygen than Earth standard. The nearest settlement was over 80 kilometers away, an impossible journey on foot through unknown terrain. He was setting up an emergency beacon when he heard it, a soft rustling in the undergrowth, too deliberate for wind. Nolan froze, hand moving to the regulation pulse pistol at his hip. I wouldn't, came a melodic voice from the shadows. Your weapon would only attract the night hunters. A figure emerged from between the glowing trees, moving with liquid grace. Nolan's breath caught in his throat. She was humanoid but clearly alien, tall and lithe with skin the color of deep amethyst that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Intricate patterns of bioluminescence traced her exposed arms and the sides of her face, pulsing gently in the twilight. Her eyes were large and almond-shaped, irises a striking silver that caught the moonlight. You're injured, she stated, approaching without fear. Her accent lilted pleasantly around the Terran standard words. Not badly, Nolan replied, forcing himself to relax his stance. My shuttle is beyond repair, she finished for him, now close enough that he could see the finer details of her face. High cheekbones, a straight nose, lips a darker purple than her skin. Her silver hair was pulled back in elaborate braids interwoven with what looked like living crystals. You're fortunate I was scouting this quadrant when you fell from the sky. I'm Nolan Wade, Terran Diplomatic Corps. He straightened despite the pain, falling back on protocol. I was en route to the summit at Capital Station when the ion storm hit. The alien woman tilted her head, the luminescent patterns on her skin flaring briefly. I am Thalia, Scout First Class of the Lumidian Expedition Force. She gestured to the insignia on her fitted garment, a silver starburst against deep blue fabric that hugged her athletic form. This territory is restricted to offworlders. I didn't exactly choose to crash here, Nolan pointed out, wincing as he shifted his weight. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Thalia's features. No, I suppose you didn't. She pulled a small device from her belt and spoke into it in a language the universal translator in Nolan's ear couldn't process, all musical tones and clicks. My outpost is 8 kilometers east, she said after finishing her communication. We should reach it before the nocturnal predators become active. Nolan asked. Thalia's luminescent patterns pulsed in what he would later learn was mild irritation. Would you prefer I leave you here as carrion for the spine wolves? Nolan managed a smile despite his pain. When you put it that way, lead on. She helped him gather essential supplies from the wreckage, her strength surprising him. As they worked, Nolan noticed how her bioluminescent patterns shifted with her movements and seemingly her emotions, brightening when she was focused, swirling when thoughtful. "Your markings," he ventured as they prepared to leave, "they're beautiful." Thalia paused, her patterns momentarily flashing brighter before settling. "They are not merely decorative," she replied, though the subtle darkening of her cheeks suggested his compliment had registered. "They help us communicate and navigate in darkness, evolutionary adaptations from our oceanic origins." They set off through the forest, Thalia setting a pace that challenged Nolan despite his diplomatic core fitness regimen. The forest grew more alive as true darkness fell, plants and small creatures glowing in a bioluminescent symphony that reminded Nolan of old Terran deep-sea documentaries. "Your people?" Nolan asked after they'd been walking for nearly an hour. "The Lumidians, I don't recall them being mentioned in our diplomatic briefings." Thalia ducked under a low-hanging branch laden with glowing fruits. "We prefer isolation. Our interactions with other species have been problematic in the past." "Yet you're helping me," Nolan observed. She glanced back at him, silver eyes reflecting the glow of the forest. "Perhaps I am curious. Terrans rarely venture this far into the outer territories without purpose." Before Nolan could respond, Thalia suddenly stiffened, her markings dimming to near invisibility. She held up a hand for silence, then pulled him behind a massive tree trunk. "What?" he began in a whisper, but she pressed a finger to his lips. The touch sent an unexpected tingle across his skin. "Scarlet Talon mercenaries," she breathed, her face close to his. "They've been prowling our borders for months. They mustn't find your shuttle." In the distance, Nolan could now make out the faint hum of anti-grav engines. A search vessel passed overhead, its spotlight cutting through the canopy less than 50 meters from where they hid. "They're looking for something," he whispered once the vessel had moved on. Thalia's expression was unreadable, but her markings pulsed rapidly. "Or someone." The rest of their journey proceeded in tense silence, Thalia constantly alert, leading them through increasingly dense vegetation that would hide their trail. Nolan's diplomatic training included recognizing when someone was withholding information, and every instinct told him Thalia knew more about those mercenaries than she was letting on. Finally, they emerged into a small clearing where a sleek structure was nestled among the trees, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. Its architecture was organic, flowing lines blending with the natural environment. "My outpost," Thalia announced, approaching a section of wall that illuminated at her touch, revealing a doorway. Inside was a single room that managed to feel both Spartan and elegant. Advanced technology melded seamlessly with natural elements. Living plants grew from the walls, providing both oxygen and soft illumination. A curved console dominated one wall, displaying data in a script Nolan couldn't decipher. "Sit," Thalia instructed, gesturing to a cushioned platform. "I need to treat your injuries." As she gathered medical supplies, Nolan noticed a small object on her personal console, a crystal similar to those in her hair, but larger, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to shift between colors. "What is that?" he asked, curiosity overriding caution. Thalia's movements faltered for just a moment. "Nothing that concerns you," she replied, her tone making it clear the subject was closed. She approached with what looked like a medical scanner, her luminescent markings flowing in calming patterns. "Remove your outer garment. I need to check for internal injuries." Nolan complied, wincing as he peeled off his torn uniform jacket. Thalia's scanner hummed as she passed it over his torso, her free hand occasionally pressing gently against his ribs, sending unexpected warmth spreading through him at each touch. "3 bruised ribs, minor concussion, several lacerations," she diagnosed. "Nothing beyond my capabilities." She applied a cool gel to his ribs that immediately began numbing the pain, then used a small device that seemed to knit the cut on his forehead closed without leaving a scar. "Your medical technology is impressive," Nolan commented as she worked, acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle floral scent of her skin. "We Lumidians have always been healers," she replied, her voice softer than before. "It is our greatest gift and our greatest burden." Their eyes met as she finished treating the last of his cuts, and something passed between them, a moment of connection that transcended their different species and the strangeness of their meeting. The moment shattered as an alarm blared from her console. Thalia rushed to check it, her markings flashing in what Nolan was beginning to recognize as alarm. "The mercenary vessel has changed course," she said, her voice tight. "They're heading directly for your crash site." "That's impossible," Nolan protested. "There's no way they could have tracked my shuttle through that iron storm unless they were waiting for you," Thalia finished, turning to face him with newfound suspicion in her silver eyes. "Who exactly are you, Nolan Wade, and why would Scarlet Talon mercenaries be hunting a simple diplomatic courier?" The question hung between them as the outpost's exterior lights automatically dimmed, plunging them into darkness broken only by the glow of Thalia's bioluminescent markings and the pulsing crystal on her console, a crystal that now seemed to beat in rhythm with Nolan's racing heart. "I'm exactly who I said I am," Nolan replied, holding Thalia's suspicious gaze. "Diplomatic courier for the Terran Alliance. What I don't understand is why mercenaries would change course for a routine shuttle crash." Thalia's luminescent patterns pulsed in rapid, agitated sequences as she studied him. Finally, she placed her palm on the console, and a compartment in the wall slid open. She withdrew what looked like a sleek pistol. Nolan tensed, but she merely tucked the weapon into a holster at her hip. "We need to move," she said, her silver eyes never leaving his face. "This outpost is designed for stealth, not defense." "You still don't trust me," Nolan observed. The corner of Thalia's mouth quirked upward. "Trust is earned, Terran." She tossed him a sleek garment from a storage unit. "Put this on. Your uniform marks you as an outsider." The garment was similar to hers, a fitted bodysuit in deep blue with silver accents. The fabric felt unusually light yet strong, molding to his form as if tailored specifically for him. "Adaptive biomesh," Thalia explained, nodding his surprise. "It will help mask your thermal signature." As Nolan changed, wincing as the movement aggravated his healing ribs, he noticed Thalia carefully removing the pulsing crystal from her console and securing it in a specialized compartment on her belt. "That crystal seems important," he ventured. Thalia's markings flickered briefly. "It's a Lumidian heartstone, sacred to my people." Before Nolan could ask more, she activated a sequence on her console. The entire outpost began to fold in on itself, technology and organic components merging until the structure resembled nothing more than a large fallen tree. "Impressive," Nolan murmured. "Necessary," Thalia corrected, leading him toward the back of the clearing. "The Lumidian Council granted permission for me to bring you to our enclave, but only because leaving you behind would risk greater exposure." They set off through the forest along a path invisible to untrained eyes. The twin moons cast enough light for Nolan to follow, though he suspected Thalia could navigate by the bioluminescence alone. She moved with practiced stealth, occasionally pausing to listen or check a device on her wrist. After they had been walking for nearly an hour, Nolan broke the silence. "Those mercenaries, the Scarlet Talon, you've encountered them before." Thalia glanced back at him, her expression guarded. "They've been probing our territory for months. They work for the highest bidder." "And who's bidding?" Her pace slowed slightly. "Various interests, corporations, weapons developers, anyone who's heard rumors of Lumidian technology." "Like your healing capabilities?" Nolan asked. "Among other things." Her voice had grown distant and her markings dimmed. They crested a ridge, and Nolan stopped in his tracks, momentarily forgetting their precarious situation. Below them stretched a valley bathed in bioluminescent light, a hidden city grown rather than built. Structures spiraled from the ground in organic shapes, their surfaces alive with the same luminescence that marked Thalia's skin. Waterways carved through the settlement, glowing with phosphorescent algae. "Nixhaven," Thalia said, a note of pride entering her voice. "One of the last true Lumidian enclaves." As they descended into the valley, Nolan noticed movement among the structures. Other Lumidians, their skin ranging from the deepest violet to lighter lavender hues, all bearing unique patterns of bioluminescence. Many stopped to stare as Thalia led him through winding pathways toward the center of the settlement. "They don't see many humans, I take it," Nolan commented, acutely aware of the scrutiny. "You're the first in Nixhaven in over 20 years, Thalia replied. "The last visit didn't end well." Before Nolan could ask for details, they arrived at a large spherical structure that seemed to be half embedded in living stone. Two Lumidians stood guard at its entrance, their markings glowing in rigid patterns that suggested military discipline. Thalia spoke to them in her native tongue, her own markings flaring in what appeared to be formal patterns. The guards regarded Nalan with undisguised suspicion, but stepped aside. Inside, the structure opened into a vast chamber where a semicircle of 9 Lumidians sat on curved benches. Their skin tones varied, but all bore more elaborate luminescent patterns than Thalia's, suggesting age or status. At the center sat an elder female whose deep purple skin was adorned with markings so complex they seemed to tell a story across her visible skin. "The Council of 9, Thalia whispered to Nalan. "Speak only when addressed directly." Thalia stepped forward and knelt briefly, her markings shifting to a formal configuration. She addressed the council in their language, occasionally gesturing toward Nalan. The central elder, clearly the leader, responded with a musical series of words that made Thalia's markings pulse rapidly. Finally, the elder switched to flawless Terran standard. "Step forward, Nalan Wade of Earth." Nalan approached, giving what he hoped was a respectful nod. "Thank you for allowing me into your sanctuary, honored elder." The elder's markings shimmered subtly. "I am Elder Verai, first voice of Nixhaven. Scout Thalia tells us your arrival coincides with increased mercenary activity in our territory." "A coincidence, Elder," Nalan replied. "I was en route to diplomatic negotiations when an iron storm forced my shuttle down." Elder Verai exchanged glances with the others, their markings communicating in ways Nalan couldn't begin to decipher. "Coincidences are rare in a galaxy of design," she finally said, "especially when they involve a diplomatic courier carrying classified information through restricted space." Nalan kept his expression neutral despite his surprise. "My mission details are confidential. Yet we know you carry data regarding the disputed territories of the Helix Nebula," Elder Verai countered. "Territories where ancient Lumidian ruins have recently been discovered." The realization struck Nalan like a physical blow. The diplomatic package he'd been tasked with delivering contained boundary negotiations for exactly those territories, negotiations that would give the Terran Alliance mining rights to systems rumored to contain precursor technology. "How could you possibly know that?" he asked. A younger council member leaned forward. "The same way the mercenaries knew to find you, there is a breach in your diplomatic corps, human." Elder Verai raised a hand for silence. "You will remain in Nixhaven until we determine whether your presence endangers our people. Scout Thalia will be responsible for you during this time." Thalia's markings flashed in what might have been surprise. "Elder, with respect." "The decision is made," Elder Verai said firmly. "Take him to the visitor quarters and ensure he understands our ways." The visitor quarters turned out to be a small but elegant dwelling on the settlement's periphery. Like all Lumidian structures, it was partially alive, walls that responded to touch, lighting that adjusted to occupant needs, and curious plants that seemed to filter and perfume the air. "This is hardly being a prisoner," Nalan commented as Thalia showed him around. "Don't mistake comfort for freedom," she replied, though her tone had softened since the council meeting. "The dwelling is monitored and the perimeter is secured." Nalan sat on what appeared to be a living cushion that conformed to his body. "So you're my jailer now." For the first time, he saw Thalia smile, a subtle curve of her lips that made her markings shimmer pleasantly. "I prefer cultural liaison." She sat across from him, her posture relaxed for the first time since they'd met. In the softer light of the dwelling, Nalan could better appreciate the intricate beauty of her luminescent patterns, how they flowed like liquid light beneath her purple skin. "You have questions," she stated. "About 1,000, Nalan admitted, "starting with how your council knows about classified Terran diplomatic files." Thalia's markings dimmed slightly. "We have our sources. What concerns us is why those mercenaries diverted to your crash site so quickly." "You think I'm being tracked?" "I think someone wants what you're carrying. Information or—" Her gaze dropped to the secure diplomatic pouch still attached to his belt. Nalan's hand instinctively moved to protect it. "This contains only data crystals with treaty amendments." "Does it?" Thalia asked, her silver eyes searching his face. "Are you certain of the contents?" The question unsettled him. As a courier, Nalan's job was to transport, not inspect. The pouch's contents were sealed with diplomatic codes far above his clearance level. Why would the Lumidian Council care about territorial treaties? He countered. Thalia stood and moved to a wall, touching it in a specific pattern. A section transformed into something like a view screen, displaying a star chart of the nearby systems. She highlighted a cluster of stars. The Helix Nebula territories contain the remains of our ancestors' greatest achievements, she explained. Technology your scientists have barely begun to comprehend. The ruins your corporations seek to exploit are actually dormant seed ships, vessels that once carried Lumidians across the stars. Nolan frowned. The reports classified them as abandoned resource deposits. A convenient misclassification, Thalia said bitterly. The Terran Alliance has a history of reclassifying inhabited worlds as resource opportunities. The accusation stung, partly because Nolan knew there was truth to it. The Alliance's expansion hadn't always been as ethical as the diplomatic corps claimed in their public statements. "And the crystal you carry," he asked, "is that related to these seed ships?" Thalia's markings flashed in surprise before she could control them. "You're more perceptive than most humans," she said, her hand moving to where the crystal was secured at her belt. "This is an activation key, a heartstone that can awaken the dormant ships, if it fell into mercenary hands." "They could sell it to the highest bidder," Nolan finished. "Weapons manufacturers rival governments." "Precisely why I was scouting the border regions," she confirmed. "We received intelligence that parties were searching for both the Heartstone and the courier carrying the treaty that would give them legal access to the territories." Nolan felt a chill. "So I wasn't the target, I was the convenient solution, if they captured me with both the treaty and you with the Heartstone. They would have everything they needed to claim the technology legally and activate it," Thalia nodded. "The question is, did someone arrange for your shuttle to be diverted into that ion storm?" Before Nolan could respond, an alarm echoed through the settlement, a haunting, multi-toned sound that made Thalia's markings pulse rapidly. She sprang to her feet, reaching for her weapon. "What is it?" Nolan asked, rising despite his protesting ribs. "Perimeter breach," she replied tersely. "Multiple intruders." A communication device on her wrist activated, displaying a Lumidian face marked with urgent patterns. The rapid exchange in their native language left Nolan in the dark, but Thalia's expression told him everything he needed to know. "The mercenaries?" he asked when she finished. "Yes, they've tracked us somehow." Her silver eyes met his, suspicion warring with concern. "They've never found Nixhaven before today." The implication hung between them. Either Nolan had been followed despite their precautions, or he carried something that could be tracked. The diplomatic pouch suddenly felt like a burning coal against his hip. "Thalia, I swear I didn't know." A massive explosion cut him off, shaking the entire structure. Outside, flashes of weapons fire illuminated the night. Thalia grabbed his arm. "We need to move now." "Where?" Her markings pulsed in determined patterns. "To the sanctuary caverns beneath the settlement. If they're after the Heartstone, we can't let them find it." She hesitated, searching his face. "I need to know I can trust you, Nolan." In that moment, looking into her silver eyes, feeling the warmth of her hand on his arm, Nolan made his decision. He unclipped the diplomatic pouch and held it out to her. "Check it for tracking devices," he said. "I've been carrying this since I left Earth. If I'm being tracked, it's through this." Thalia's markings brightened in surprise. Handling a sealed diplomatic pouch was a serious breach of protocol that could end his career, or worse. She took the pouch and ran a scanner over it. Her markings flashed in alarm. "There's something embedded in the lining, non-standard issue." Another explosion rocked the settlement, closer this time. Screams and weapons fire grew louder. "We need to go," Thalia insisted, securing both the pouch and her Heartstone. "Stay close to me." As they slipped out through a hidden passage in the dwelling's floor, Nolan realized with startling clarity that somewhere in the chaos of the last 24 hours, his priorities had shifted. His mission, his career, the diplomatic corps, all seemed suddenly less important than helping Thalia protect her people from a threat his own kind had unwittingly delivered to their doorstep. And beneath that realization lay another, more unsettling one. The strange, impossible attraction he felt toward this alien woman with purple skin and luminescent markings who had saved his life, and now trusted him with her people's greatest secret. As they descended into the darkness beneath Nixhaven, guided only by Thalia's bioluminescence, Nolan wondered if he was falling into something far more dangerous than any planetary crash landing. The sanctuary caverns beneath Nixhaven were unlike anything Nolan had ever experienced. Crystal formations rose from floor to ceiling, each pulsing with the same bioluminescence that marked Thalia's skin, creating a subterranean landscape that seemed both ancient and alive. They hurried through winding passages, the sounds of battle from the surface growing fainter. "These crystals," Nolan asked as they paused at an intersection of tunnels, "they're connected to your markings somehow, aren't they?" Thalia nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the ambient glow. "They're crystallized thought patterns of our ancestors, living memory encoded in light." She placed her palm against one, her own markings synchronizing with its pulse. "They guide us and hide us." The crystal flared briefly, and Thalia chose the leftmost passage. This way. More Lumidians had taken refuge in the caverns, families huddled together, their markings dimmed in fear. They watched Nolan pass with wary eyes, some with open hostility. A child with lavender skin reached out curiously toward him, but its parent pulled it back with a sharp word. "They blame me for bringing this danger," Nolan said quietly. "Fear makes us suspicious of differences," Thalia replied, her tone softening. "Not unlike humans." They descended deeper until reaching a vast underground chamber where an underground river flowed into a luminescent pool. Beside it sat a sleek vessel unlike any Terran craft Nolan had seen. Organic curves blended with metallic elements, its surface rippling with patterns similar to Lumidian skin markings. "Your ship?" Nolan asked. "Scout vessel," Thalia confirmed, approaching a panel that illuminated at her touch. "Fast, stealthy, and capable of atmospheric and void travel." The ship's entry hatch spiraled open in response to her palm print. Elder Veri emerged from the shadows, accompanied by 2 guards. "The evacuation is proceeding," she informed Thalia. "The young and vulnerable are being moved to our secondary settlement." "And the attack?" Thalia asked. "Contained for now. Our defenders have pushed them back to the northern ridge, but they'll return with reinforcements." The Elder's gaze fell on Nolan. "You've checked him for tracking devices." "The tracker was in his diplomatic pouch, not on his person," Thalia replied. "I've neutralized it." Elder Veri's ancient eyes studied Nolan with unsettling intensity. "And you still believe bringing him here was wise?" "With respect, Elder, I believe the coordinated attack would have happened regardless. The mercenaries had been searching for months." "Perhaps," the Elder's markings pulsed in complex patterns. "The Council has reached a decision. You must take the Heartstone to the Ancestral Archive in the Crimson Nebula. Only there can it be truly protected." Thalia's markings flashed in what Nolan recognized as surprise. "That journey crosses 4 contested territories and the Scarlet Talon's known hunting grounds." "Which is why you'll take the human with you," Elder Veri stated. Me, Nolan, and Thalia spoke simultaneously. The Elder's markings shimmered in what might have been amusement. "His presence provides diplomatic complications for any who would intercept you. Additionally, his knowledge of Terran shipping routes may prove useful." "And if we're captured," Thalia added with sudden understanding, "having a Terran diplomatic courier as witness makes it an interstellar incident rather than a simple theft." "Precisely." Elder Veri removed something from her robes, a small crystal pendant on a chain which she placed around Thalia's neck. "This contains the coordinates and access codes for the archive, guarded as you would the Heartstone itself." The Elder then turned to Nolan. "Terran, your actions have placed our people in danger, but your willingness to surrender your diplomatic pouch suggests honor. Will you help Scout Thalia complete this mission?" Nolan knew this was far beyond his diplomatic assignment. Aiding Thalia meant potentially violating Alliance protocols and betraying the very treaty he'd been entrusted to deliver. Yet the alternative, allowing powerful ancient technology to fall into mercenary hands, seemed far worse. "I will," he said firmly. Elder Veri's markings pulsed with approval. "Then go quickly. We will create a diversion to cover your departure." As the Elder departed, Thalia guided Nolan into her ship. The interior was a seamless blend of technology and organic components, control surfaces that responded to touch, seating that adjusted to their bodies, and lighting that pulsed in rhythm with Thalia's markings. "Strap in," she instructed, settling into what appeared to be the pilot's position. Her hands moved over the controls with practiced efficiency, and the ship hummed to life around them. "No pre-flight checks?" Nolan asked, securing himself in the co-pilot's seat. Thalia's lips curved in a slight smile. "Lumidian vessels are semi-sentient. It's been ready since I touched the outer hull." The ship rose silently, ascending through a shaft in the cavern's ceiling that spiraled open as they approached. They emerged into chaos. The night sky above Nixhaven was lit by weapons fire, and several mercenary vessels circled the settlement perimeter. "Hold on," Thalia warned as she engaged the main thrusters. The acceleration pressed Nolan back into his seat as they shot upward at an impossible angle, breaking through the atmosphere in seconds. "That was," Nolan gasped when he could breathe again. "Necessary," Thalia finished, her eyes fixed on the navigation display. "And temporary, they've spotted us." The display confirmed her assessment. 3 mercenary vessels had broken off from the attack on Nixhaven and were now in pursuit. "Entering coordinates for the Crimson Nebula," she announced, her fingers dancing across the controls. "It's our only chance at losing them. The plasma storms will mask our signature." Nolan studied the projected course with growing alarm. "That route takes us directly through the Baryon Rift. The radiation levels are lethal to humans." "But not to Lumidians," Thalia replied without looking up. "And this ship is shielded against most forms of radiation." She finally met his gaze. "Most forms." "Meaning?" "Meaning you'll need to enter the suspension pod once we reach the rift boundary. It's designed for emergency medical use, but it should protect your biology during the passage." Before Nolan could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Proximity alerts wailed as the pursuit vessels opened fire. "First, we need to survive long enough to reach the rift," Thalia muttered, executing a series of evasive maneuvers that defied the laws of physics as Nolan understood them. The ship responded to her touch as if it were an extension of her body, twisting and diving through space with impossible grace. A lucky shot from their pursuers grazed the port stabilizer, sending them into a controlled spin that Thalia somehow converted into an attack vector. She inverted the ship, bringing them directly over one of the pursuing vessels, and released a pulse that temporarily disabled its systems. "One down," she announced grimly. "Where are the weapons on this ship?" Nolan asked, searching the control panels. "Lumidian scout vessels don't carry conventional weapons," Thalia replied, banking hard to avoid another volley. "The pulse disruptor is our only offensive capability." "A pacifist culture with technology everyone wants to weaponize," Nolan observed. "The universe has a cruel sense of irony." Thalia's markings pulsed in what might have been agreement as she pushed the ship to its limits. The stars blurred around them as they accelerated toward a distant patch of space that glowed crimson against the blackness. "The nebula," she explained. "Once we're inside, their sensors won't be able to distinguish us from the background radiation." They hurtled toward the nebula's boundary, the pursuing ships closing the gap with each passing moment. As they crossed the threshold, the viewscreen automatically dimmed to protect their vision from the sudden explosion of color, swirling reds and purples, shot through with veins of luminescent gold. The ship's systems flickered momentarily as they adjusted to the nebula's unique properties. Their pursuers hesitated at the boundary. Most mercenary vessels weren't equipped for nebula navigation. "They won't give up," Thalia said, not slowing their pace. "They'll circle the perimeter, waiting for us to emerge." "Then we don't emerge where they expect," Nolan suggested. "How far to the Baryon Rift?" 3 hours at current speed." Thalia gestured to a display showing their route through the nebula, a twisting path through radiation pockets and plasma storms. "The suspension pod is in the rear compartment. You should prepare it now while we have a moment of relative safety." Nolan unstrapped himself and made his way to the rear of the ship, finding a cylindrical chamber that reminded him uncomfortably of a coffin. As he examined its controls, trying to decipher the Lumidian interface, he sensed Thalia's presence behind him. "You don't trust auto-navigation?" he asked without turning. "The nebula interferes with automated systems," she explained. "I've plotted a course that should keep us safe, but I needed to." She hesitated. Nolan turned to face her. In the nebula's crimson light filtering through the viewports, her purple skin took on a deeper hue, her silver eyes almost glowing. Her markings pulsed in patterns he couldn't decipher but found strangely mesmerizing. "Needed to what?" he prompted gently. "To make sure you understood the risks," she finished. "The suspension pod will protect you from radiation, but it's calibrated for Lumidian physiology. For a human, there could be side effects." "What kind of side effects?" Thalia's markings dimmed slightly. "Temporary neural synchronization with the pod's biomatrix. Possibly. Dreams or hallucinations drawing from both your memories and the pod's residual neural imprints." "You mean I might experience Lumidian memories?" She nodded. "From whoever used the pod previously, in this case me." The implications hung between them in the crimson half-light. To experience another being's memories, especially one so fundamentally different from himself, was both fascinating and intimate in ways Nolan hadn't considered. "Will it work both ways?" he asked. "Will you experience my memories?" "No," she replied. "The synchronization is one way. The pod preserves and protects." A warning chime from the cockpit interrupted them. Thalia glanced over her shoulder, her markings pulsing rapidly. "A plasma storm is forming in our path. I need to adjust our course." As she turned to leave, Nolan caught her wrist. Her skin was warm beneath his fingers, the markings there brightening at his touch. "Thalia, wait. If I'm going to experience your memories, there's something I should tell you first." She didn't pull away, her silver eyes meeting his. "What is it?" "The treaty in my diplomatic pouch. I don't believe my superiors knew what they were really bargaining for, if they understood what was truly at stake." "Would it have made a difference?" she asked, her voice soft but challenging. "Would they have recognized our claim to our ancestors' technology, or would they have simply used different tactics to acquire it?" Nolan wanted to defend his government, his mission, but the doubt in her eyes mirrored his own. "I don't know," he admitted finally, "but I know what I would have done, what I'm doing now." Something shifted in her expression, a softening, a new awareness. Her free hand moved to his face, fingers lightly tracing his jaw in a gesture that felt both alien and achingly intimate. "You are unlike any human I've encountered, Nolan Wade," she said, her markings flowing in patterns that seemed to reach toward him. "Perhaps that's why the universe arranged our meeting." The ship shuddered, breaking the moment. Thalia's professional demeanor returned instantly. "The storm is intensifying. We need to move quickly." She helped him prepare the suspension pod, explaining each step of the process. As Nolan settled into the contoured interior, Thalia stood over him, her expression unreadable. "The pod will seal automatically when the radiation levels rise," she explained. "You'll be unconscious until I wake you after we've cleared the rift." She hesitated, then added, "Whatever memories you experience, remember they're fragments without context." "Will they be painful?" Nolan asked, a hint of apprehension in his voice. Thalia's markings pulsed in what he now recognized as contemplation. "Some may be. My life hasn't been without loss or regret." Then, unexpectedly, she leaned down and pressed her forehead to his, a Lumidian gesture of connection he somehow understood intuitively. "But there is beauty, too. I hope that's what finds you."